Hi, I'm Danger Dan Jers, the host and GM of the D&D Real Play podcast, D&D Dark. Join us on Wednesdays for an absurd, over-the-top comedy horror adventure, starring some of history's most infamous monsters.
I'm Ben Magnet. I play Mary Frankenstein, our barbarian.
I am Daniel Cruz. I am playing Imhotep the Mummy, our cleric.
I'm Jordan, and I play Larry Talbot, a lycanthropic warlock.
I am Grayson, playing Jet Griffin, the Invisible Man, the party's rogue.
I am Aaron. I play the Phantom of the Opera, our bard.
For more information, go to dndarkpodcast.com and listen to us anywhere you find podcasts.
Let's go. Master of all things tabletop. With the Paladins of Podcast. They ruin the games you love by talking rules that suck, how to build kick-ass encounters, destroy worlds, and really get your players invested. So go ahead and throw that fistful of dice at someone. Because we're going on a side quest.
Everybody, I messed that up. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of SideQuests with the Paladins of Podcast, Rob and Eli.
Woo,
Eli.
back at it again.
Oh, every week, my man. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a beautiful day. I love all the sun, and sadly, I haven't been playing a lot of tabletop RPGs recently. Still on a break, and my Thursday group, we just haven't been able to get together with quorum, and it's the final session, so it's tough, because usually we play if there's one person down.
Yep. But
for the finale, we're just trying to get us all four of us, all four players, and the GM at the same time. So it's
for the final session.
Yeah.
Man, that sucks. That's like when you take a mid-season break from a TV show, but it's right before the last episode anyways.
I've done that before. I'm like, what? Oh, wait, I just had one episode? Oh, man.
Yeah.
But, we've been able to play a few board games, so it's been nice, just because we mainly still hang out, most of us that can make it. And we've also had a chance to chat about maybe some other games that we might play after. So
okay.
There's two people that GM a lot, me and another person, but then there's a third person that was like, I'd be interested in running a one-shot, and I'm always excited about that. I always try to, especially when we're like, if there's dedicated or like more people or people that are more dedicated to GMing, I love it when there's a break between them to try to, push people to at least try a one-shot.
Yeah,
There's no pressure. There's pressure for me to do it. But like running the actual session, there's like no pressure on if it's quote unquote quality, especially if it's the first time running. Like,
right. It's
go for it.
The one-shot method is such an easy barrier to break over. Like, once you get the one session down, like, you're in. You can call yourself a game master, a storyteller, a dungeon master, because you've done it. And as long as you're playing in an environment that is at least welcoming, like yours sounds to be, and the way you talk about it, it definitely, I would believe it to be, is that once somebody kind of pops the cherry the first time, they're at least going to get constructive feedback. They're not going to be said, like, hey, you suck, don't do this again. They're going to be like, hey, you know what? This was good. It was fun. If you have any questions or want to hear some pointers, these are a few things that you can kind of work on here and there. I think it's great.
And it's just so low, like there's no consequences.
Right.
You don't have to even keep track. You hardly have to, for a one shot, you hardly even have to keep notes, because it's just like, well, at the end of the session, did everyone have fun? Huzzah. Perfect. Nothing that they did is going to matter for any other games that you play farther down the line.
Right.
Boom.
Right.
So.
It's very similar to, and this is going to sound funny when you first hear the analogy, but running a one-shot for your first time is very similar to getting married. And we're like, how does this cross over? So,
oh my,
get this. When you get married, when you're standing up at the altar with you and your significant other, nobody in the crowd knows when something goes wrong. So as long as you don't make a big deal about it, you don't call it out, they don't necessarily know. It flies right over their heads. It goes right under the radar. As a DM, your players don't know what you forget to do. They don't know what you've sort of botched a little bit or what rule you didn't imply.
What do you mean when something goes like when someone misses a line in their vows?
Even
or
if
like
you were
just something goes wrong in the wedding in general.
In general, think about it. If
Okay.
somebody missed a line in their vows as a guest, would you know?
No, not really. I mean, unless it's I do, and then you're like, ooh,
Right.
It's a bad one.
But still, I mean, in general, you don't know if they missed a line in their vow or if their fingers are a little swollen and sweaty because they're anxious that day. And instead of the ring going on the ring finger, it goes on the middle finger. You can't see it. You don't know. That's actually a trick, by the way. So
Really?
for anybody, yes, absolutely. For anybody whose nuptials are coming up soon, if you are anxious, nervous, your hands are a little swollen, and it doesn't seem to fit on the ring finger, slide it on to another finger. Sometimes the pinky. The ring just has to go on. People in the audience won't know. They're not going to see it. So, just a trick. Those things, and that's why I say it's just like when you're married. Actually, it's whenever you organize an event, as long as you don't call anything out, people aren't going to know. DMing is the same thing. That low bar adventure, you don't have to take notes. You don't have to have that extra developed story. They're not going to know if you screw up. You're going to be the only one. That's okay. That's great. So that's my little bit of advice. Don't sweat it.
That's how I'm doing. How are you doing, Rob? Did you mess up at your wedding?
Man, that was so long ago. 7 years.
Just seemed very on point. It sounds like you were coming from specifics.
Well, no, I didn't mess up at my wedding at all. It went off really, really well. But it was something that I was told when we were going to get, my wife and I were going to get married. And her father actually officiated the entire thing. And he says, guys, look, don't sweat it. If something goes wrong, nobody's going to know. All right. If you guys forget something or trip up, they're not going to know. They're going to think it was just planned. They're going to think it was part of the thing. If you forget something, they'll never even realize. They can't miss what they don't know is not there. And it's stuck. And I see places to impart that wisdom all the time. And it just happened to be that it clicked here subconsciously. And I got really excited. Like, I got something.
And if you end up in an unhappy campaign that started because of this one shot, you can always get divorced.
You went real dark there, Eli.
Hey, it's the 50% of campaigns ended divorce.
No, I am positive it's closer to 95.
Yeah. Well,
There's never enough time for commitment. That's so bad that there's memes about it.
I need to see other GMs. I'm sorry.
Oh, so bad. Anyhow,
okay, so how are you doing, Rob?
Well, in life, I'm not doing too bad. Updates on things like physical therapy, because I'm in a much stronger physical therapy now. For my left arm and hand, it is absolutely destroying my ability to use it outside of physical therapy.
Can you roll metal dice now?
Actually, I don't even like to press the button on the blender. So rolling metal dice is a little bit more uncomfortable.
Jeez, how often do you use a blender at the table?
You know what? Anytime my players step out of line.
Your character's dead.
Yep. Every single time. You know what? That'd be great. Have a paper shredder next to fuck this guy.
Reach in for my dice and I'll bring out the blender. Bring out the blender.
Other than that, I'm doing really well. High spirits. I've been really analyzing a little bit about my burnout and whatnot and how to combat that. I've played some games with my party that we're not on a break from getting together. We're just on a break from the session, and it looks like it's only going to be one session long because the next session is when my players return with new characters. 2 players return with new characters after they stepped out for a few months, and we're going to go through a session 0, scale down the story, and kind of hit it off. Other than that, burnout from running games constantly and writing adventures. That's a lot of creative capital you have to constantly refresh. So I've just been taking it easy. Lots of caffeine. Actually, I think that might be where my extra energy came from. I've had double my normal amount of caffeine today.
Well, I hear having a young kid will do that to you.
Are you looking for a D&D podcast with a dark side? Something more like Game of Thrones and less like Monty Python? Tale of the Manticore is part dark fantasy audio drama, part solo D&D RPG. There's no plot armor here. The dice make all the important decisions. Join me as I resurrect the excitement, wonder, and emotion of old school D&D. Made for a mature audience, Tale of the Manticore is both a fiction and a game. It's the story where chaos rolls.
The need for caffeine? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. She's adorable, by the way. Like, I don't generally talk too much about my personal life on the podcast. Like, I want to shelter everything behind a rock. However, my new daughter is adorable.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yes. What's cool about this being a podcast, not a video cast, is I can say that all I absolutely want, and there's no proof. Nobody can disagree and prove me otherwise.
Who's gonna do that?
I don't know.
Sorry,
we have
Rob.
like 12
Kids
regular
are ugly.
listeners. You know, they might be. I don't know. I'm biased. It's my kid.
Yeah. They're all cute at that age.
Yeah.
They might be
I would
gremlins,
agree.
but that's why other people's kids are cute.
Because they're gremlins?
Yeah.
Just
I don't
don't
see
get
any
them
of the
wet.
gremlinness.
That's fair. Just don't get them wet or feed them after midnight. They're generally fine. So, all right. Because we've talked a little bit about that burnout and constantly writing shit, I want to talk to you a little bit about the Echoes of Vaerock campaign I've been doing. We've talked about the forced time progression. I want to float a new idea by you.
Okay. What is your new idea?
So I've been working on a new magical system, and I'm hesitant to call it a full system, but I think in reality that's what it is. And it's based off of the idea, the real idea of ritual magic casting. So where you would do things like you would gather your elements, you would draw your circles, you would confer with the energies, you would manipulate the essentially the contract between the magical forces, whether they be beings or elemental control, etc., and you would complete this ritual. And I will call them arcane rites. So as you're performing these rites, you will have magical effects. That on the face is a great fluff description. But what I want to do instead is eliminate the idea of traditional casting by requiring skill checks instead. So right now I have it set up for most of the spells I've made where there are 5 skill checks needed. And you have to succeed at these 5 skill checks to successfully perform the arcane rite. Now, they can be I wrote in there sort of like a degree of failure. So if you fail by X amount, these changes happen within your casting. So it's no longer I cast fireball and it's successful. It is literally I am performing a ritual arcane rite, and this is how it can swing based on my roles for performing the skill checks here. So
in your game, how do you view not having any of your players play like wizard, sorcerer, any of the magical casts? Will they only play non-magic, so like the martial classes, and then through their skill access be able to cast spells?
No, particularly I feel that the campaign itself will be open to have all classes available. Even the Myth Warden, which is a class that I created when I wrote the Lost Libraries of Timbaria. the idea behind the Arcane Rites to include it is because it's about a lot of occult premise, a lot of rituals that are going on to summon demons or bind certain elements or force creatures into some form of servitude.
So like for a wizard, what is the change? Can they cast their spells normally and then they also have access to ritual spells? Or are all of their spells replaced with ritual spells?
No, not all of their spells would be replaced with ritual spells. Ritual spells would be available to every class because they no longer require the essentially that they would no longer require the wizard class to be necessary, or the sorcerer class, or the warlock. That means a fighter or a barbarian could essentially perform an arcane rite. And the way that you would do it is by making the skill checks and following the incantation or the somatic components, the spell components, etc. Basing it a little bit closer off to what you would see in real life occult magic.
Okay.
So we can all go hit the internet or go to a bookstore and pick up a book on magical spells, and it will tell you what you need. It will tell you what you need to do, and whether we have a lick of magical ability or not, we can still perform that. So I wanted to base this idea off of that metaphysical element where they have to actually put skill into it, and then they can fail or succeed to varying levels.
So at the table itself, what will be the change that your players will be seeing? Like, is it just that now they can all kind of cast spells? Is it that the enemies are casting spells a lot more? Like, do you just want everyone to be doing these rituals all the time?
No, I would love it if they don't do the rituals very often because they're time consuming. However, what I would like to see, especially as you mentioned, what changes there would be, is that when you normally see a spell being cast, like I said, just like I cast Fireball, and then all of a sudden, Fireball is successfully cast, and your opponent has to make a save, and it's save to take half damage, save to take no damage, and it's usually the result that the magic is always successful. And when it comes to the idea of doing a ritual casting, like if I was to summon a monster from hell, if I mess that up at all, like if it's not spot perfect, either that monster's not coming and I'm getting something worse, maybe not as bad if I, didn't mess up very good or I over succeeded, etc., or the whole thing could backfire and it could blow me to smithereens.
But you just said that as a wizard, my normal spells aren't changed. So why would I cast a ritual spell to summon a demon when I eventually have a summoning spell inside my spell list?
So when you, for example, in D&D 5e, when you summon a spell, summon creature, etc., it's usually for X amount of rounds until dispelled, etc. When you perform an arcane rite to do so, it is bound now. Like, it is subservient to you. Like, you have forced it into servitude.
Isn't that the point of the permanent spells and the metamagic feats to allow your spells to be permanent?
But now you're hitting high tier level spells, and those high tier level spells aren't always generally realistic to get to. Most campaigns peter out before they get to those level spells. They're expensive to cast. Metamagic spells increase the level of necessary power that you need. By performing ritual spells, we have just subjugated it down to skill checks.
So why not just scale up your game so that your characters are higher level and have access to these features that are already in the system?
Because I wanted something that thematically fit with the idea of occultism, ritual spells, and magic that was sort of beyond the constraints of pure arcane or divine sources.
I mean, I guess I'm a little confused because I hear you saying that, but then I also hear you saying that the players are not really going to see a difference in how they're interacting with the game.
No, the players do. So we have, like I said, instead of casting a spell, so Eli, if you are a wizard,
Yeah.
and you want to cast a spell, you're going to cast a spell. Like you would say, I cast Fireball.
Yep.
All right. To perform an arcane rite, you don't just say, I cast Fireball or I perform an arcane rite. It is, let me bring up the exact portion here, because the way it changes makes sense.
Right, I now have to spend, I have to do 4 skill checks and Fireball goes off.
Right, but again, these are not to cast Fireball. I mean, it's not for spells that are generally damage spells. These are for certain ritualistic style spells. But yeah, so instead of using a spell slot, you take the time and you make X amount of skill checks. This one's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are 6 skill checks of varying difficulty. And now if you fail those skill checks, the DM can help determine like what happens when the ritual, the arcane rite fails, or how badly it fails, or how poorly it fails, or where in the event that it fails.
Or like in this game campaign, are you going to be incentivizing the players to use these rituals? Are you just wanting to give them like bound servants? Like, are you going to have the enemies have a bunch of summoned monsters that maybe goes right or wrong?
At times, yeah. Like there's talk about a lot of rituals and binding spells that are going on within the adventure. And there are the types of spells that I have kind of worked in together. Time dilation, time mutation, astral projection, binding elements, binding subservient demons, essentially. Warding against certain elements, and they last for a longer period of time than just a spell that lasts for rounds. So the idea is to provide another system or way for magic to work. And this allows the DM to have a finger in when magic fails, because in ritual occult magic, things can fail and go wrong.
Yeah.
So
it reminds me a little bit of like the DCC's magic system, where every spell you cast has a chance to go wonky or weird.
Okay.
Craig used to talk about that a lot. It's one of my favorite parts about the DCC magic system, where basically every spell you have is incredibly unique. I think it's a great idea. I think I like this, but I personally, I don't think I'd run it in a game in which you had both magics. I feel like if you have normal magic and you have these ritual magics, you're kind of like my magic's so much better than this.
Right.
Or you just become highly skilled, because I know in a lot of these games you can become very highly skilled.
Yes.
I would personally run it where the other magic users aren't played. Like everyone plays a martial class, so that the only way to access magic is by having these skills and then using them to do these ritual magics. Then it makes it a little bit more rare. But I mean, in Hackmaster, there's also the thing where if you have arcane lore, you can cast any like scrolls you come across. Right. As long as you've read it and understand it, boom, you can just pull it out and read it. There you go.
Right. So yeah, I definitely, hearing some of this, I think that I can find a way to limit it a little bit, like a barrier of entry. You can only know X amount of rights, or you have to find a way to keep X amount of rights, but just giving them access to all the rights as though it's a spell list, really would take over the system, and you would definitely find players who are going to choose one or the other, and running them both could be problematic.
I have a little bit of a question though about how you were going to run it, and you're like, when you are planning on running this, if you're running the enemies, how are they going to interact with ritual magic? are you going to roll for them as well and determine how well they succeed or fail? Or are they just always going to succeed with no problems? Or are they only going to have a chance of failure if the players are quote unquote on screen seeing the ritual happening?
No, it would, the way I would run it, especially in this campaign, because the evil guys, like the opponents, are always performing ritual magic. I would have them always auto succeed unless the players are actively trying to stop them.
Ooh.
Nope. I'm going to railroad them on that one because that is exactly what this entire adventure is to do. It is to stop ritual summoning from bringing a demon back to the material plane. So the idea of forced time progression is to make sure certain things kick off. They have to make decisions on what things to absolutely actively achieve. So it fits. Not to mention, if I'm rolling off screen for something that might happen later and it doesn't happen later, I'm going to bullshit it and say it does anyway. So,
Man,
hey, you know what? Not to mention, you wouldn't know anyway, Eli, because it's behind the screen. You wouldn't know if it screw up or not.
I mean,
I could roll successes.
You would when the players, like, because you've got multiple like states. The party could show up and the demon's been summoned, or the party could show up. They're like, oh yeah, let's go stop these cultists. They show up. They like show up in the basement, blood everywhere. Everyone's been brutally slaughtered, and there's just like an immaculately dressed, mustached, like mustache twirling devil who's like, oh, hello, nice to meet you. I don't know what happened here. Like,
that's written in. Like, if their failures are written in as much as successes are written in the adventure.
Okay.
So you only asked about one of them. I'm gonna run it. Like, yeah, they're gonna succeed when they need to succeed, fail when they need to fail, and the only time that I'm gonna have to roll for them is when the party is actively engaged in trying to stop them.
Yeah, see, I think I guess I prefer a game where it's more flexible in that sense, in that the end I still have the NPCs roll checks but behind the scenes in when I'm doing my setup. I'll roll and I'll stay true to those rolls.
So. This the way I would run this one is more linear. Only because the thematic element and the end game for Echoes of Vaerock, for it to work out, certain things have to be performed successfully. Otherwise, it would not work out. Because that's how the story is written. So, all right, change up a little bit, but not too much. I can handle that. I can compromise on some things. All right, so that covers Arcane Rites, and that's me talking a whole lot about it. You were telling me that you've been wargaming quite a bit. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I haven't been doing a lot of I've been doing a lot of tabletop games, but I've been playing a lot of Battletech and the Middle Earth strategy battle game, which my first game I ever got into, my first tabletop game. So,
like, that's before pen and paper, or like your very first foray into tabletop gaming that wasn't sorry.
I think I got into it before. I mean, like board games, but I think I got into it actually just a little bit before D&D, or about the same time as I got into 3.5. But it was it was just right in the same ballpark area. But I was building miniatures back then. I love Lord of the Rings, and I don't think I ever played it with anyone until like 8 years later, but I loved having the miniature. They were my action figures that I put together and play with.
For sure.
So,
for sure.
Yeah. And now a lot of fun. I've been painting them up. I enjoy that.
I got one.
It's a little bit easier than doing like my Battletech stuff. I like doing a lot of individual designs.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're painting up like 30 warriors of Minas Tirith, you're kind of just like get all your armor, get your weapons, maybe a little bit of differences here and there, but just kicking out batch painting.
Sure. Now, I don't have a huge experience in tabletop wargaming. I'm a fan of it based on the premise of when you walk in and you see a table that's loaded from every edge to every edge with 3D terrain and full scale like buildings and massive amounts of army figurines, etc. I'm in awe. I love that. But I've never played, primarily because it's a lot. And the joke is, I mean, Warhammer 40K is called 40K because it costs 40 grand to get into.
Yes, that is very true. Unfortunately, the Middle Earth game is also a Games Workshop product.
So you need the ancient 40K.
Yeah. So luckily, I spent all the money already on it when I was a youth, and the prices were cheaper.
There you go.
Fist of clouds,
right? So
but I also love the beautiful 3D terrain. It's inspired me to try to do more 3D terrain for tabletop games, which is why I love systems that can go gridless.
Honestly, any system that has a standardized rule for grids, you can take away the grid.
Yeah. It's just never talked about. I don't think I've ever seen someone playing. I've never played Pathfinder or D&D without a grid. I've never seen anyone doing it either. I mean, unless they're doing full theater of the mind,
right?
But I've never seen someone play gridless with like a battle map.
I have actually played gridless with no battle map for Pathfinder First Edition, and it was not a full terrain setup, but our combat battle mat, but our battle maps didn't have the grid, but we all had these little rulers. Essentially, they were like the 6-inch, based on regular movement, and so we could move to any degree of this here. And it was neat. I've seen very similar stuff when I've seen like Warhammer being played. I've seen people with their tape measurers, which that is a little off-putting, but I understand why it's necessary. Working with a tiny, clear, plastic, no-numbered rulers was, not far off, but it's different because you expect to be like, all right, I'm just going to count 6 and go. Now I'm just going to go to the end of this ruler. I can go anywhere between. It's cool because you don't have to worry about it. Again, the awe-inspiring for me came from the fact that there was so much terrain on the table.
I really like gridless for ranged attacks, especially when you enforce a system of like you can't measure before you declare your target, sort of thing.
Okay.
Because then it's fun to be like, I'm going to try to shoot at this person, and then you're like, oh, he's just he's in my long range. Oh shoot, that's going to be a -6 or whatever, and then you just take the shot. But
fair.
Because then you can also be like, I'm going to place the fireball here. And then you're like, oh, actually, you're within 20 feet. Sorry about that. That's one of my biggest pet peeves about like pre-measuring or having like grids is that the fireball just conveniently manages to sear the person you're fighting, but not you. Or you do burning hands right in between your friend's legs, sort of thing. Somehow it doesn't hit anyone but your enemies or your friends.
So I mean, I like to think of those as Saturday morning cartoon physics, because that's the kind of thing that you would generally see in Saturday morning cartoons. At times it's bothersome, and what I will actually do is make battle mats that are too small to really do a lot of those pre-measure. It's like if you're going to cast fireball in this 15 by 15 room, you are all going to get roasted. So when they intentionally do that without a way to save their friends, they're going to get shanked later that night. They know it.
I do a lot of, especially for like fireballs, where it's supposed to be like a 20-foot radius. If someone throws it in a hall, I have it'll fill more volume, right? Like it's not exploding horizontally, so or on the x-axis, so it has to explode also just the only way it can. Line Z.
Yep. And do you ever accidentally back yourself into a really crappy corner that way too? And like, I said that these hallways are 50 feet tall, and your fireball really just filled up a big up space. Wishing you could go back and say, I wish I got that 50 feet horizontal spread instead.
What do you mean by that?
So I do the same thing. Volume. If they're in a big hallway, it fills out. But if I
Yeah.
said like, the ceilings are really high, realistically, when the fireball explodes, it's also going up. It's not capped by a ceiling, so I don't get the full 50 feet
Oh,
horizontal volume because so much of it went up. I backed myself into a corner.
yeah. I mean, I use just like it expands every way possible. It's you're trying to fit a volume.
Mhm.
So I don't have it just explode horizontally and not vertically. I have it explode every which way it can possibly
Yes.
explode.
That's fair. As we've talked about a little bit of the terrain, you're getting into terrain, and we like our terrain to be versatile, so we can use it more than once.
Yeah.
Have you thought of? I've done this, and I'm asking if you've thought about the idea. Have you thought about developing a piece of terrain, for example, building for general use, a hut, an inn, etc., whatever? And when somebody casts fireball, because we're using that for our pinnacle here, if somebody casts fireball and blows out a wall, would you take out a wall, or would you paint it to reflect the fact that somebody cast fireball in there, and then just
Not
leave
at
it?
the table.
Well, no, not at the table, but after they leave, like they'll definitely be back to this location, and when you put it back down the table, now it's got fireball remnants from it, and for future ever, it has fireball remnants.
I mean, generally, when I use the same location again, it'll changes from the parties or from time will take effect. But I haven't done anything like that for my terrain. I have done it a little bit on miniatures because
Okay.
I've played a lot. I like to play a lot of like campaign or escalation style games, like Mordheim, where you start with one party, and then at the end, based on the wounds you get, maybe one of your characters like loses a leg or gains new equipment, and then the next week you like model that equipment onto the miniatures, and then your warband advances. So I have done that side, but not on the terrain.
I got a question. As we've talked about shredding character sheets immediately, how hilarious it would be if your character lost a leg and you just grabbed a pair of clippers and just cut off the mini's leg. Just like here you go.
If it's my model, I would totally do that.
That's funny. I've done it with. I was a hut, if I remember correctly. Like I used for a church. Somebody cast fireball along the corner of the wall, and it blew out the wall. So I broke out a chunk of the wall after game, and I painted it so it looked all scarred and whatnot. And the hut castle area was forever like that until I accidentally stepped on it and broke it. So that happened when I moved. So
I do like the idea of doing that, but I feel like it goes against my general policy of trying to have terrain that I can use repeatedly, or reuse for different campaigns or different purposes.
That's fair.
I do like some specific stuff, and I end up trying to pick some up. I think that's my next step with my Dwarven Forged is to pick up more. I have a bunch of generic stuff. I got a lot of hallways, a lot of corners and whatnot. So now I have to get into the weird niche things.
Yep.
It's just the burden of being a collector.
Yes.
Completionists.
My entire bookshelf says, yeah, that's exactly the problem. Like we collect hobbies on top of our hobbies at this point. Like we have hobbies that filter in and they're adjacent to our tabletop hobby. We got to collect all of that too. I get it. I understand completely. In fact, it's actually
self-imposed expensive-ness.
It is. And like, as we talked about minis and painting them, it kind of reflects, I just lost, well, not lost. My airbrush broke.
Oh, that's rough.
Yeah, it is. And when I first got into the idea of airbrushing, I remember that I had talked to you a little bit about it in one of our episodes of SideQuests early on. And you had mentioned that airbrushes are a great tool if you want to lay down quick primer in batches, which I do, because a little bit of paint in an airbrush goes a long way. Excuse me. So I picked up a rather cheap airbrush that's lasted me for about a year now. The brand was Go Cheer, and it's just a knockoff on Amazon. The needle bent I don't know how. The nozzle doesn't screw on to the body anymore, and it got filled with paint because I forgot to clean it one day. So it's just kind of gone to shit, and I'm in the market for new ones. I like the idea of siphon-fed airbrushes, but talking about hobbies that are adjacent to hobbies, we're collecting minis. I'm painting them. I'm buying more airbrushes, which can be cheap, but can also be expensive, just to paint shit, man. Like I could run with them being gray, but I don't. Sorry.
Yeah, there is something beautiful about having, like, coming up to a table and seeing everything painted. I mean, no shade if you can't paint your stuff, or if you don't want to, or you don't have the time. Whatever floats your goat. But having a fully painted terrain set or fully painted army, it just, everything just pumps. So even if it's painted comically, and actually I've seen some amazing comically painted things. I think I played a game of Flames of War one time against a German army that was entirely like painted Barbie themed.
Oh, hilarious. Cool. I came across a meme on the internet that said, in session 0, you should do this. You get a bunch of Lego pieces, and everybody builds their miniature out of Legos. And then they set the pose to glue them down onto the base, and then there's their mini. It's a Lego glued to a base. And I thought that was really neat. It'd be a fun session 0.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. It'd be great for like a Transformers game too.
Yeah, I would dig that. It's funny because I've used Legos before, and I'm like, sorry guys, all I got right now is a Lego. But to use a Lego seriously, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could even build 2-scale brick buildings with Legos.
Maybe I think I personally wouldn't do Legos. I think there's just something about it that throws off miniature? For miniatures. I think it would just, there's something about it that I just don't think would fit with my vision of how a game would play. But I don't think if I rolled up as a player, I think I'd be all in. But as a GM,
I completely understand. I get that because we all know that I like to provide more. I like to put in a lot. So when you see a Lego versus a well-painted miniature, you're going to be drawn to the miniature, in my opinion. But I have learned not to discredit the Lego character because, you know what? Go the extra mile, give them another layer of paint if you want, or some wacky hairdo. As long as everybody's having fun, it doesn't matter. So
I think there's also, like, Lego is very one branded, which is tough to get into others. But there's a lot of different miniatures out there. It's easy to mix and match.
Agreed. As we're coming up close to a little bit of the time left, I'm not sure we're going to have enough time to talk about this particular mechanic from another game. So I'd like to leave us with a cliffhanger and maybe try to catch up, talk about pushing the role from the Call of Cthulhu games and adding it into your games. Because as I mentioned before our recording started, my players will all make skill checks until somebody succeeds, whereas your table doesn't necessarily have that issue.
Yep.
All right. Let's try to pick up next week's episode here. We'll try to jump right in with this because I want to know how you manage that, because my table, they're just going to keep trying until somebody succeeds. So I want to know Eli's secret ingredient.
All right. I'll bring the secret sauce next time.
I was avoiding saying that.
You'll never hit my recipe.
Hey, that's fair. Once I do that, it's going out
next week.
Sounds good. So just as we're about to finish up, Eli, any inspiring words of advice?
Download UDisc and go play some disc golf. It's a fun game.
Is it a video game about disc golf?
No, UDisc is just an app that'll tell you where the nearest disc golf courses are and give you ratings and information on it. But
if I had to ask that question, I'm obviously not an avid disc golfer. And we might have wanted to preface that entire idea with the fact that it wasn't a video game. Earlier this week was National Video Game Day.
No, didn't know that was a day, but I probably played video games to celebrate. Definitely.
Yes, that's fair. Now you know. Everybody else knows. And we'll see you next week. Don't forget to check us out at epictablegames.com or online at Facebook. I've said this backwards. I've been messing up all day, man. Facebook/epictablegames. epictablegames.com. And, oh yeah, we've been forgetting every episode. Check out the D20 Open Gaming, D20 PFSRD for Pathfinder Open Gaming Network for all your random shit that you need. John's going to love that one.
Okay,
Later.
New intro. We've changed the name, and we're still using the word paladin. Paladin. I mean, it hasn't been used in the English language in about 200 years, but okay.